This is the I Read Comic Books podcast. I'm your host, Brian Murray. Joining me today, two gunslingers hell-bent on revenge, Kait Scotchless.
Hello.
And Kate Lamphere.
Pew pew.
Thanks for joining me, guys. Today we're going to be talking about The Sixth Gun as part of our Goodreads Book of the Month reading fiasco. But before we get into that, there are two questions that I have been instructed by our legal department to ask you. How have you been, and how have comic books been? Let's start with you, Kait Scotchless.
I have been pretty good. I am enjoying this fine Halloween day. It was beautiful and clear this morning, so I got to go out for a walk in the woods, and now it's kind of gloomy, and that's okay too, because I'm in here talking about comics with my friends, and then we're going to play Starfinder later, so it's a good indoorsy kind of day. So to be festive, I read the Batman Little Gotham Halloween and Thanksgiving issue, which is... apparently there's a series of these hardcovers put out. I got this from my library for different holidays, and each hardcover is 24-ish pages, so really, really small, and covers two holidays. So each issue, quote unquote, is maybe 12 pages. I like Dustin Nyan, who does these, and the other writer is Derek Friedolfs, with lettering by Seda. Gonna butcher it, Temofonte maybe. But while the art is fun, the writing is rough. There's no real story to be interested or not interested in these, because they're mostly trying to have too much happen in too few pages. Less would have been more in this case. And I realize these are intended for children. They're very middle grade. But as listeners of the show know, I read a lot of middle grade and really like middle grade. So while I'm not the target audience, I also am not someone who's just going to be oh, this is for children, so it's not good. So in the Halloween issue, Batman teaches Robin what Halloween is and trick-or-treating are, which could have been really fun, but it's a 2-panel explanation and just kind of well, okay. And then in the Thanksgiving one, the Penguin crashes the Thanksgiving Day parade to liberate his feathered friends from being eaten. And I'm am I on the Penguin side? I might be on Penguin's side on this one. And then you see him after he gets captured being served turkey in prison as the final thing. I'm ooh,
wow.
This is rough.
That is way darker than I think they meant it to be.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. So, I don't know, for a cute little thing from the library, it was fine. Obviously, 24 pages takes no time to read. What I do think was interesting, probably the most interesting about the book was at the back, there's a bunch of pages of questions for kids to be reading, but it's not just printed questions. They'll have the frame or multiple panels that the questions are about in the back with the question and have an arrow pointing to it. And a lot of them are kind of comics comprehension type questions, pointing to a panel in which there's audio from the TV announcers, and that audio is in the zigzaggy box instead of a normal dialogue box. And it says, why is this in this shape and things like that, which I thought was cool, as these being more of a fun way to teach kids sort of stories versus just for a fun sort of situation that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I feel as adult comic book readers, people who talk about comics as much as we do, we probably don't think about that kind of stuff anymore.
Yeah, the things that just become intuitive. When I notice it is when I'm reading manga and I don't know their versions of things sometimes and get confused.
The visual shorthand they use.
Exactly. For the longest time, I didn't realize that just a bubble without an arrow to it was not necessarily speech and stuff like that. So that was one of the things I read. I also read Sheets Volume 1 by Brianna Thumler, which is middle grade, and it's delightful in a sad way. So this will a little bit break your heart. It is about a girl who's 13 years old, but is functionally had to grow up overnight because her mother passes away, and she really is single-handedly running the family laundry business and caring for her little brother because her dad is in a really severe major depression episode. And she just feels invisible at school, at work, just in general, and is really struggling. And in parallel, we see a 11-year-old boy who's died, and so he's a ghost and is literally invisible. And he also wants to create a life for himself and be seen. And it's one of these kind of worlds collide situation where he tries to set up a life for himself at the laundromat and accidentally in the process sabotages the life that Marjorie is like struggling to maintain, and like not lose the family business, not be unable to buy food, stuff like that. And so it's a story about like the two of them kind of pulling through and becoming seen by one another and their respective communities. And it's just so beautiful of a story, but also just a really beautiful, unique art style and color palette, so that it's this sort of sad but cozy sort of read. And I'm definitely going for volume 2.
Yeah, that sounds really good.
It is. And there's like enough comedy so that you're not like just devastated constantly. Like the ghost boy is in ghost therapy, to get in like a group therapy to come to terms with being a ghost and all that. And it's it's good. I think you'd really like it, Kait.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out. I think I have that bookmarked on Hoopla and I just haven't read it yet.
It has been on my list for a long time too, to the point where I've definitely checked it out at least once, but never actually got around to reading it because that's the thing I do.
Yeah, and I did check it out thinking it would be like a Halloween thing. It is not Halloween like at all. Even though he's a ghost, like it has zero Halloween vibes. So it is a good like whenever you want to read.
Very cool. What about you, Kait?
Yeah, I read Parish Volume 1. This is by Cullen Bunn with art by Jonas Scharf and colors by Alex Gutierrez. And this focuses on a crime family that deals with a hallucinogenic drug that is derived from the ashes of the dead somehow.
Oh, relatable.
Well, if you've seen iZombie, that's also like a theme. So this is just a whole idea in pop culture now, I guess. Anyway, in this book, the users can see the experiences of the people that their ashes are from, and exactly how this drug is created is like this big family secret, and one that is starting to be revealed toward the end of volume 1. And there's in addition to this whole drug thing, there's also drama within the family and also within other criminal organizations. And I'm not usually into that kind of story, this like criminal underground idea, but then the suggestion of this like supernatural element is really intriguing to me. And then there's the coloring on the credits page and in these hallucinations, and it's really vibrant and enchanting, which is really juxtaposed against how dark the rest of the story is and the rest of the art. But that actually like works really nicely. Like it is visually stunning, and then it also matches the tone of the story very well, and it makes it really easy for me to understand why these drug users would want to seek out this drug, because it's such a difference, like visually such a difference between their experience with the drug in color and then the rest of their lives in what is very dark. I mean, it's not black and white, but it's very dark. And I actually have a story about getting this book. I bought this at a C2E2 con one year. Maybe this was even March 2020. I can't quite remember. But it's been in my to read pile since then. And I actually like talked to Cullen Bunn in the Artist Alley. And I was like, hey, I want to pick up one of your volume 1s. What one do you like the best or recommend? I can't remember quite how I worded it, but he suggested this book to me out of his work.
Cool.
Yeah, and there's more of it on Hoopla too. I think that there's, oh my gosh, at least one more volume, maybe 2 more volumes, and I do want to keep going with this. Like it is dark in a not just visual way, but the story is really interesting to me.
Yeah, I wonder if there's any kind of like influence from the comic book Chew, because this sounds like a very similar premise, but more like, instead of being like a cop, an investigator who uses this power to consume the dead and see how they died, it is instead like a criminal organization monopolizing on a very similar power.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and then like with I mentioned that this idea is in iZombie too, and it just seems like it is a theme kind of in this slightly darker horror genre right now.
Yeah, I guess maybe we're trending towards cannibals. Maybe that's going to be the next big thing.
Oh no, I hope
You know,
not.
zombies are over, vampires are over. We're doing cannibals now.
Oh no.
Well, for me, I finally got around to reading my backlog of We Only Find Them When They're Dead. This is one of my favorite books from Al Ewing, Simone DeMeo, color assist by Maria Sara Miotti, and letters by And World Design. The book is getting away from the premise that I liked so much in the first one, where it's not so much about the mystery of like, what are these gods, where are they coming from? It is now more about spycraft and intrigue, which is not bad. It's just not what I came to this book looking for. That said, it is definitely still well written enough that I'm going to keep going. I guess a mild spoiler is the gods have stopped showing up after the final one arrived. And so a cult has sprung up around this final god corpse. And so it's kind of about like what's going on with them and the corporate interests that are trying to claim it for their own. Like I said, it's still very interesting. It's just not quite the same as it used to be.
Yeah.
It does continue to be one of the most beautiful books I've ever seen, though. I mean, the line work, the colors, all of it is phenomenal.
I really like the color palette they used. I haven't read as far as you are, but I read the first volume and I remember really liking that.
Yeah, they did a lot of very cool stuff in these 2 issues with like big, broad splashes of red and white on the coloring to really make things pop. Yeah, if you're not reading it, I definitely recommend you check it out. So, moving on from there, we've talked about what you have read. What are you going to read? Let's start off with you, Kait Lamphere.
Okay, so I have to say that Lore Olympus got pushed out. So the real answer to this question is still Lore Olympus. But I do want to call some attention to Proctor Valley Road got collected and is releasing this week. This is by Grant Morrison and Alex Child, and it's from Boom Studios. This is a story about, it's set in the 70s, and it's about a diverse group of 4 kids that tries to set up like this spooky tour of the local haunted desert road in order to raise some money to go to a Janis Joplin concert. And of course, the hauntings end up not just being local myths, and the kids end up trying to save the day and make this concert. And so there's like extra tension here about like, are they going to be able to do this thing that they want to do and also not die? And I actually read this as singles, Brian. I read your singles that you bought from the comic shop. So thanks.
And have not read myself. So maybe this will have to go onto my list too.
And this is like a good seasonal, like low gore, spooky read. I don't think that it's like quite a young kid's book, but maybe like for teens. It's from Boom, so that pretty much gives you an idea of the age target age range of the book, but it is a little bit spookier than their normal fare.
Cool.
In terms of new releases, I want to read this book called Passport by Sophia Glock, and it's a travel memoir about this girl that grew up with like actual CIA parents who had to move around a whole bunch, and so this ends up putting this girl in a situation where she can't put down roots. She can't really get too personal with her friends. She always has to like deflect personal questions. And there's actually a disclaimer about how this is her personal story and she's not connected to the US government in the first few pages. So it's like, oh, this is real. Like part of me was like, this isn't real. This isn't an actual thing. And then I looked at the previews and there's this disclaimer and I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I wonder if Glock is a pen name, because it seems too on the nose that there'd be a CIA couple with the last name Glock.
Yeah, wow. Good point. But one of the reasons I want to read this, other than this really intriguing story, is that the color in the previews is really interesting. It's like a one color printing, kind of like grayscale, except that the one color is like this dark purple color instead of your typical gray. So it looks really interesting. And then me working in publishing, I'm like, oh, they just spent like a little bit more money to make this art better. And I just really like that decision. So I'll have to track this down. I think it is from a smaller publisher, so I don't know how easily I'll be able to get it, but I'm really interested in it.
It's the internet age. You can get anything from anywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe. Turns out how backordered it is with all the
Right.
supply
with
chain issues.
paper shortages and
Yeah.
everything. Yeah. Well, what about you, Kait?
I am excited to read Witches of Brooklyn, Volume 1. You're thinking, like, this is definitely for adults, right? And no, it's not. It is a middle grade OGN. I am
No
staying
way.
true to my colors. I know what I'm about at this point in my life. This is art and writing by Sophie Escabais. It looks cute. So it's about a girl who goes to live with her aunts in Brooklyn after her mom passes away. And so she has a new home, a new school, new friends. And then she discovers that her weirdo aunts are even more weirdo than she thought. They can do magic, and magic runs in the family. You guessed it. She's a witch, and she's in Brooklyn. And so now she has new magic too. And I'm sure stuff's going to happen, and it's going to be delightful. So this is what's sitting on my nightstand. I'm ready.
I'd love to know more about like why American culture is so fixated on witch ants. Like, because that seems like it's always the case.
Because we're super confused and think it's something paranormal when women are older and single, not married to a man specifically. Yeah. So it is just like against the natural order of things to the point that it must be like they're wearing ways. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they must be trucking with Satan.
Exactly. They have signed a book in their lives. No, this did remind me when I was reading the back at the library. I'm like, oh, like Sabrina. But I like that this is in Brooklyn. It is definitely not a high school situation. It is middle school. So I like these coming of age, discovering you have powers. Fred, way more books and comics than I can count at this point with that basic premise.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to put you on blast here, but I know I personally resonate a lot with those because as a weird kid, it was always fun to read things where the weird kid was actually special.
Yep, exactly. Special and valued.
Yeah. So, not trying to drag you for
No,
filth or anything,
I have long since come to terms with why fantasy in general is what I gravitate towards and all that.
I think this is on my to read list also, Kait.
It is definitely one of those books that, like, because I read certain OGNs on Goodreads, it was like, you should read these other ones, and I looked at it and I'm like, you're right, Goodreads, I should read that.
It's just like how Spotify keeps telling me to listen to the Mountain Goats.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you're weird, depressed.
Oh, actually, there's a non-zero chance that I saw on my feed that Kait Lamphere added this to her to read list, and I too then clicked it and put it as to read because I too was like, oh, that looks good. Like, there's a not insignificant number of books or comics that I find by seeing Kait's activity on my feed. So
excellent. That's all I want.
Well, for the sake of our listeners, I'm going to need you two to start differentiating a little bit more. You're both Kait. They need to be able to tell you apart.
I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
I can talk lower.
I'll talk higher.
All right, big Kait and little Kait. You got it.
That's uncomfortable. Moving on.
Well, before we get into my pick for the week, we do have a quick Discord pick from our dear friend of the show, Danny. Pick for this week is Human Target #1. Comics are coming out on 11/3. That's November 3rd, 2021, or November 2nd if you're DC. My pick is Hellboy, The Bones of Giants #1. And if this sounds like a thing that's making you go, wait, doesn't that already exist? You're right. It was a book that came out 20 years ago. It was originally an illustrated novel by Mike Mignola, series creator, and author Christopher Golden. This is a new adaptation of that story with art by Matt Smith and colors by Chris O'Halloran. And it appears to be a Norse mythology type thing. So we're really talking like frost giants and stuff like that. It's very interesting because with God of War, the video game series coming back, I know that's very Norse mythology focused, so it's kind of interesting to see that like Norse mythology appears to be cresting the wave again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it comes and goes. So I'm curious, at this point in the pandemic, when you guys say like what you're reading this week and stuff, are you guys going to your local comic book shop like in person? Are you still doing like curbside? Or are you talking just strictly digital pulls at this point? What are you guys doing?
I'm on a combo. I have a couple of digital subscriptions. For the most part, I still get my books in the local comic shop, but it's just kind of a pain to get there sometimes. So the last couple of big piles I've gotten have been shipped directly to my house.
Oh, nice. From the shop or from like your direct order?
Yeah, from the shop.
Oh, cool. I didn't even know that they did that.
Yeah, I will politely ask Brian to add some things for me on occasion when he ships his comics, and then I'll end up owing him like $40. Whoops.
Yeah, Kait, it's always, I've got one or two things. Can you get my pull list too? And then those things are hardcover graphic novels.
But
Trickery.
I will also add things to my Hoopla wish list, and then just kind of like keep checking back, or I'll add things to my Goodreads wish list, and then keep checking Hoopla to wait, especially if it's like a Boom or an Image book. I know it's going to show up. So
okay, cool. Yeah, I've been doing almost exclusively physical from the library because I'm so done with screens by the end of the day that I don't want to keep, I'm on the computer all day. Yeah. And so I prefer reading on paper. But the other thing being that like the library is one of the few places I can go right now. So, and like go inside and everything because they're requiring masks. Mm-hmm. So I go there all the time, even when I really don't need anything. It's just like a thing outside my apartment to do that isn't walking, like just walking around paths and stuff like that. So it's just, I end up there a few times per week.
Something that's not wandering into the woods like an 18th century novelist.
Yeah, like sometimes the weather just isn't conducive to that. We've had a lot of rainy days recently where I just went and wandered the library. Elbow the youth out of the way to get to their books,
that sounds like a great time. Maybe not the elbowing, but the wandering.
Yeah, I will say my library is extremely small because the city of East Lansing, when you take away the college kids, like the undergrad student body, is very, very small. So the actual tax base for things like the local library is very small.
Yeah, I have also submitted like purchase requests to our library a few times for things that like we had something recently that I said was my pick, and it was something that it was like short stories from multiple people that were not white. That were revolving around, I think, like the immigrant experience, if I remember correctly. And I put in a purchase request and the library actually got it. So
yeah, I had such good luck with that at KDL in the just the Grand Rapids Public Library system. But so far, none of the things in digital or physical I've requested from East Lansing have actually gotten purchased. But I know that their main funding situation is, oh my God, our building's falling apart and needs new everything in terms of like roof and water boiler or whatever the things are, So I'm guessing that they're not expanding the collection much at the moment.
Yeah, getting a bunch of new books doesn't do you a whole lot of good if the ceiling collapses.
Exactly.
Very cool. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we're back, we'll be talking all about The Sixth Gun.
Pew pew!
This week, we are going to be talking about The Sixth Gun, but before we do, I just have one quick announcement. Time is running short to complete the IRCB Goodreads Reading Challenge for this year. At time of recording, you have about 6 weeks left. That will come to a close on December 16th, so if you would like to help us pick next year's January Book of the Month, make sure that you get cracking. December 16th is the cutoff for that. So, let's talk guns. Let's talk Sixth Guns. This is, of course,
got two guns right here, Brian. Pow pow.
Wow. I can't believe you're gonna cold dead finger gun me like that. This is, of course, 6-issue collection written by Cullen Bunn with pencils and letters by Brian Hurtt. Colors mostly also by Brian Hurtt, with Bill Crabtree coming in on chapter 6. So let's dig into it. Just a quick summary. This is the story of a guy named Drake Sinclair going around trying to basically stop a zombie Confederate general from raising hell on Earth. That's the most succinct, no spoilers.
Isn't these discussions are always full spoilers? So like,
yeah,
put that
true,
on your
that's
plates,
true.
lads. If you want to read this before, hit pause here. But okay, so isn't he also trying to raise hell, but for himself? Like he also wants to unlock the vault, right?
I think it's unclear if he knows what's in the vault or not.
Yeah, that's the part that basically he thought it was treasure, but then when he realizes it's actually demon treasure, he's like, maybe not.
Yeah, and then we get the character of Becky at the very beginning, whose dad or stepfather dies trying to defend one of the 6 guns of power, and she Drake Sinclair shows up on her farm as the general's lackeys are attacking, and her dad dies, and Becky ends up kind of tagging along with Drake Sinclair, and we find out that she's not just a Mary Jane. She knows how to shoot a gun, and she knows how to stand up for herself, and
here's the thing. Did you guys feel connected to these characters? Did they feel like fleshed out to you?
Yeah, I felt connected to some of the characters. Like I can see that we came in at the beginning or at the middle rather of the stories of all of these men, all of the
Right.
Confederate general and his wife and his lackeys and Drake and his pal Bill John. And so Becky is like really the only character that we really like can connect with, I feel like, at the beginning.
Even
because
she felt so two-dimensional to me.
Yeah, I can see that. Like, I feel like they did a good job at the beginning of her story of showing, or maybe not the very beginning, but like issue 2 and 3 of showing her as being a person rather than just like the woman of the story, which is always a concern, especially in Westerns, especially because there's only like 2 female characters in the whole book. But I mean, yeah, I think that they made her strong to begin with. So then her like showing that she can shoot a gun and that she can defend herself, and that she can like, I don't know, interact with the other characters with confidence. Like that's not.
It felt believable to me, but it also didn't feel like I could tell you anything about who she is, what she likes and cares about in the world, other than her pa who died.
Yeah,
like,
I see that. Yeah.
So I guess to me, that was why I didn't get that into this book, because I didn't really connect with the characters particularly, and there didn't seem to be much of any character development or growth. It was just kind of a shootout to shoot out, bullet points of action kind of thing. Pun intended. But like part of it for me is just like, I'm just not into Westerns. So I think that also, like, I could definitely understand other people getting a lot more out of it if they're more into that. Whereas, like, definitely a fantasy person, so I did enjoy the Weird West aspects of it. My favorite part is when the Thunderbird shows up at the very end of issue 3. Like, that was a good twist. I was very here for the Thunderbird.
Yeah.
I thought they did a really interesting thing with the Thunderbird too.
Yeah.
I noticed that we never really get to see it until the end of that confrontation. Like, we just see it in shadows, or maybe we see like a giant clawed foot. But it's not until its power is being overcome that we actually get a full view of it, shortly before it is blown to pieces.
Yeah. I think I would have been more interested in the story if they went further into the like fantasy aspects. But that's like saying, I would have been more into this story if it was a different genre. So that's not really that's not a criticism per se. That's more of a take everything I say with a grain of salt, because this is not the usual river I swim in,
Yeah, if Reservoir Dogs had just been Jurassic Park, I would have liked it more.
Exactly.
Aww.
It did make me realize or remember that I still need to finish Pretty Deadly. So there's that.
Yeah, I have not finished that book myself.
Yeah.
I will say about this book that like I feel like the end, the very final issue in this volume really does change things up for the characters. And so I feel like it ends on a promising note for volume 2. Like some of the lackeys have died, and Becky understands what this gun that she is now bound to has the capability to do, both like as a weapon and then also to her, like as a person, like it can
Right.
change a person. And then Drake understands that like this treasure that he's been going after is not what he thought it was, and then he also has ended up with like what, 4 of the other guns.
Yeah, 3 or 4.
And so like and then our
Gotta catch 'em
perfect
all.
boy our boy Bill John O'Henry, man of 3 first names, has died. But there's I want to talk about Bill John, but I'm going to finish this thought
Okay.
first, where like a few of the people in the Goodreads group have also said that volume 2 gets better, like Becky gets more fleshed out,
Okay.
and like the series continues in like an even better way. So I feel like maybe volume 1 was just a lot of the exposition, you know?
Yeah. But see, I wanted more of the actual backstory. Like when we got the glimpses of like the Crusaders and stuff like that. Like, oh, give me more of that. That part was what was intriguing to me. Of like, give me more of like the world building around these guns, but there was so little of that in proportion to the just pages and pages of shootout after shootout, which is just not the part of the comic that I was into. But it's interesting to hear that from the Goodreads group. Maybe I will check out volume 2. I wasn't planning on it, but
yeah, it's definitely much more of an action story than it is necessarily like a contemplative character piece.
Right.
So back to Bill John O'Henry then.
Back to Bill John. Bill John, amazing name. And I like that we're like just no hyphen, no space. We're Bill John.
Yeah. This guy actually felt a lot like John Watson to me of the Sherlock Holmes story. Like
the bowler hat gets you there, yeah, with the like side chops.
But he feels like yes, he's surrounded by like people that know what they're doing in this situation, like Sherlock or like what's our boy's name, Drake. But like Bill John is like the actual smart guy. Like he knows when something is too risky to try to do.
Bill John's like, this is a bad idea.
Yeah,
Sherlock's like, it'll be fine.
Right. Yes, and that exact thing happens a couple of times in this book. But then Bill John goes on to support his friends anyway, knowing full well that he might get hurt, and of course he does. We see him die, but then he's like one of these mudmen that can be revived and fight for whoever owns one of these guns, and then Drake ends up owning that gun. So at the end, we actually see one of these mudmen grab the general and get him away from Becky so that Drake can shoot him. And I swear that mudman is Bill John. Like he looks exactly like him.
It. I like that we have multiple types of zombies at this point in the book. Like, there's the mudmen, there's the like zombie looking zombies, the ghost people.
Yes.
Maybe it'd be good to step back and talk about these guns, what each of the 6 guns does.
No, Brian, please. That's
way
too smart for us. Who are you? Who do you think you are? Bill John? Come on.
So we've got the gun that Kait was just talking about, the one that anybody shot with it can be raised as sort of a spectral soldier for the person holding the gun, which is a very interesting twist when it later comes into Drake's possession after he kills the guy who had it before, and the ghosts all become much more powerful because now they're fighting against the force that killed them in the first place instead of for it. I thought that was a nice little touch. The gun that her name keeps escaping me. Becky. Yeah. The gun that she has that she got from her stepdad was the zombie Confederate general's gun, and its whole thing was giving you glimpses of the future.
Future and past, isn't it?
Yes, it's future and past. So that's why she becomes sort of like the driving force of their merry little band, because she's the one who knows where to go next.
She gets the quest for them.
Yeah, exactly. She's the one who is cursed with prophecy. One of their guns is much less difficult to describe. It's just a gun that shoots big. One of the guns is just gun, but what if stronger?
Yeah. There's the eternal life one that the woman
The eternal
has.
life one. Yeah, Missy, the general's wife, Missy.
Oh, I'm so glad that you remembered her name. I was like, did this character get a first name?
I only remembered it because I was reading it and I went, "A fucking course, her name's Missy."
Well, and it's that usual trope of like, oh, the evil woman is actually an ugly hag because, of course, she's an old, ugly woman, actually, tricking people into thinking she's young and pretty.
Yeah, that was an unfortunate return to Western trope,
Yep.
I felt like.
Yep.
And not even Western trope, just like American fiction, particularly.
Yeah, I think my most recent experience with that one was actually Game of Thrones, so.
Yeah.
So that was 4 of the guns, right? And then we have the gun that was like the flesh eater. Like if you get shot with it, it's just like this.
Oh
flesh.
Yeah, it's like a disease.
Yes, but it kills you like immediately. Like you just kind of dissolve. And then there was another one.
The Hellfires one.
Yes.
Yeah. I think the flesh melter gun was perhaps the most horrifying for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was some. It's not nearly as gory as it could have been.
Yeah, because it is like a cartoony art style, so it's not shocking in the way that it could have been.
Yeah, but they died bad. The people who shot with that gun.
Yeah, I do have to say that the beginning of this, like the first few issues, even was kind of confusing, because you get the first gunfight where people are like dissolving and also catching on fire, and it's very like, where is this happening? Where was this fire? Where did that come from? And then of course that's just part of the exposition to set up these guns. So that kind of gets explained. But then I was also confused about how much time had passed, and I feel like that did affect my understanding of the story until like the very end. So that'd be like, that was most of the book, because the backstory had this like in ancient history feeling to it, like it was generations ago, and this general had been trapped in this well for a really long time. But then like the preacher stepfather is still alive, like naturally, like he's dying of old age. And Becky talks about how he like kind of showed up one day in her childhood and became her stepfather. So it's only has to have been like maybe 15 years, but that's not the way that it felt.
But it couldn't have been, because the woman, Missy, like when she loses her gun, she ages like 50 years.
Yeah, but she wasn't young when she got the gun.
Oh, I guess I missed that part.
Yeah, it didn't like freeze her at the age she got the gun. It made her like supernaturally youthful.
Okay, so what did you guys make of that scene with her losing the gun by having her hand chopped off, and then she like is it like a demon now that's like escaped her body?
Right?
Like what is that? What's happening
Wild.
there?
So I think what it is that the gun's power is limited to the gun. So she can only heal while she has the gun on her. So when the gun is cut off with her hand, the only thing that can heal is like from the hand. So it regrew an entire body.
Okay, you think it's a double of her though, not like a new creature, demon, something different.
Correct.
Okay, that
that's
makes
my
sense.
take.
That makes sense.
I think that we're gonna end up finding out that she is like the guns are they change you. Like that is said in the story multiple times. And we kind of see that with the other lackeys, like the guy with the flesh eater gun is all wrapped up in bandages. And the guy with like the boom, the cannon gun, basically, the extra effective gun, he's like very beefy and large and is like partially armored naturally. So I feel like we're going to find out that this new person that has grown out of this gun is somehow more powerful than the original person, because she didn't start as all human,
Okay.
But I don't know. We'll find out.
So are you guys like really eager for the next one? You already requested it, put it on hold, or are you like, maybe I'll pick up the rest, or where are you at with the story?
I'm definitely gonna keep reading it. I don't know. I wouldn't call it like I'm not gonna get off this call and immediately start reading volume 2. But they introduced like a terrifying hell gate with guns as keys to the lock, and
yeah,
I don't know how to say no to that.
I think that we end in a really interesting place. Like I was saying before, that everybody's situation has kind of changed and all of their goals have changed. And now we have two of these missies. And I think that that's a really interesting place to end the story, just in terms of, you were saying character development was kind of lacking in volume 1. So I'm like, okay, character development is the focus of volume 2. Let's go.
Okay.
So I have actually already requested volume 2 and 3 from Hoopla, but part of that is because it's the last day of October and I had borrows left. So
that is such a good point. I did not think about and should have done that this morning, because I would bet money by the time we're done with this recording that my capacity for the, like, if you don't get on Hoopla in the morning with my library system, like, you're SOL during ever since the pandemic started. It says like your, library's thing has been hit for the day.
Yeah, talking about characters being kind of indistinguishable. This is something that actually Paul on Goodreads pointed out. They said the first 12 pages had me flipping back and forth to figure out that Sinclair was not the head Pinkerton, a confusion that held through the Moncrief farm for me.
Yep.
And I had the exact same problem.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like they both have the same hat. They both have the same mustache.
Yep.
And the art is vague and cartoony enough that those are kind of like the key things that I clung to.
Yep.
So when those matched, I couldn't tell the characters apart.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, my differentiating characteristic was that the mustache for Drake was thinner. So yes, I agree. Very similar. We had some other Goodreads comments too. Lenny said Bunn and Hurtt combined several different genres: Western, horror, adventure, and some fantasy for a totally unique story. And they're not a fan of horror, but to them it's enough to add a weight to the world and maybe more importantly, high stakes to the guns. Yeah, and I totally agree with that.
Yeah, and I think that the book also, in a very quick little sequence, establishes that these guns are not new to the world.
Right.
They have existed as other weapons throughout history. And I do think that kind of opens you up to like tell those other stories if you're Bunn and you so choose.
Yeah, I like the club with the metal wrapped around the top. I'm like, they didn't have metal in the what? But yeah, or maybe it was supposed to be thorns or something, like a thorny vine, and I misread it. But yeah, I, like Nancy was saying, the art of Brian Hurtt seemed like too cartoony at first, but then she stopped noticing. Like, that's where I was at with it too, where at first I was like, I don't know about this art, but then I kind of got used to it and it didn't stand out at all. It didn't stand out like in a good way per se, of like, wow, this is just blowing me away. Like, the art is gorgeous. Like when I was reading Sheets, when we were talking in the first half of the show, that was like, the art kept standing out in a good way, but it wasn't standing out in a bad way either. So it just kind of like fit, if that makes sense. What did you guys think about the art?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that it did the job.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't be buying prints of individual frames anytime soon.
Right.
But I did appreciate that it found a way to not sugarcoat the horrors of being shot with a gun that rots your flesh away, but it also didn't go full like Invincible, like we're going to show you every gory drop of blood on us.
I thought that like there were a couple of aspects that I was like, why is this drawn this way? Like Missy's eyes were like gigantic. But other than just a couple of little details like that, I feel like the art style kind of worked for this story with the goal of it not being too gruesome. Like you guys were saying, still understandable, still kind of realistic without too much blood. So I think that it actually ended up matching the story pretty well, except for a few little things.
Yeah.
And I do think that a lot of the undead looked very cool.
Yeah.
Like they were exactly what I picture when I think zombie, is like picture perfect what these guys were. And like the Confederate general who was very like Ghost of Jacob Marley wrapped in chains.
Yeah.
Like floating around and swinging these chains about looked very cool. So what did you guys think about Drake as like a hero for the book? Like, do we think that he is a hero, or is he an anti-hero?
Yeah, he feels very anti-hero to me.
Yeah, he mentioned a couple of times that he's got like this dark history that means that he has like the emotional capability to handle owning one of these guns, whereas like another person might maybe not be in the right mind space, and the gun could just like destroy them if they tried to pick it up.
But wait. But Becky is fine. And Becky, we're intended to believe, is a good person, right? Like, she's the preacher's daughter and all that.
Yeah, like it's one of those things where the mythology sets up where if a person dies and their gun is sitting there and they are no longer like connected magically to this gun, if you pick it up, you'll be fine because now you're the new owner.
Yeah.
But if you try to pick up a gun that is already bound to another person, another living person, then it could just like, you could just kind of catch fire or be possessed or something. I wasn't entirely clear what happens, but
it seems to burn them.
Like we see Drake use one of the guns that he doesn't own, and like his hand burns, but he's able to shoot it.
Yeah, I guess especially the scene early on sets him up with the ghost tree of all the hanging men ghosts, and he makes a deal with them and then promptly breaks it because he could make money selling the map to them. So, screw you, you're not getting eternal rest because I could make some money. And that to me felt very intentional of like, we're supposed to see that this is who he is kind of thing. And he's out for himself and his word can't be trusted. And then he sort of shows us that again with Becky, where he, takes her to the mall, that he knows is like where there's going to be, danger and risk for her, but he wants the treasure there and he's not upfront about that's why they're going there. Certainly he seems to have a change of heart where he's like, oh, we're unlocking hell beasts, not treasure. Okay, never mind. But like, that's still like to say, it seems pretty self-motivated of like to save his own skin versus and to get revenge on the general versus like out of the goodness and kindness of his heart. Like even at the very end, we see them living it up in New Orleans. And it's because he sold that map, like that he promised to destroy. So I don't think we're intended to believe he's like become a good person or something.
Yeah, it's very tough to, in a story that actually features the Pinkertons, to be like the most disgusting example of capitalism.
Right.
But yeah, that's a really good point that like he could let these ghosts rest forever, but instead he chooses to make a buck.
Yep. I don't know. Did you guys feel anti-hero, or were you more like hero in a morally ambiguous world sort of situation?
I would agree with anti-hero.
Okay.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's a stretch to even get him that far.
Yeah.
I think that he might have to settle for the term protagonist and be done.
There you go.
Yes, very good.
Like he's certainly not a villain, but I don't think that, because like even with an anti-hero, there's this idea that they're doing questionable things for the greater good or to stop somebody who's even worse. And I guess he is trying to stop, a flying undead Confederate general. So that's certainly worse than him. Like you said, it does seem more like he's not trying to defeat evil for the sake of defeating evil. He's trying to defeat evil because evil is coming to kick his ass.
Right.
So let's get into wild speculation territory. I want to know, what do you guys think is going to happen from here?
I think that it's going to come down to the now 3 women at the very end of the story. I think that there's going to be some kind of confrontation there, because you've got Becky, who is our good girl, and then you have the young Missy, who is now regrown from the gun, who was like our bad girl. We see young Missy go away with the general at the end, if I recall. And then we have old Missy, who is missing a hand now. And I think that we're going to get into like her story, where this leaves her. I don't think that she's just kind of gonna die and that's it. I think that something's gonna happen there.
I'll be honest, I thought she died.
Yeah, I thought that she like got old and turned to dust.
Yeah.
After the hand got cut off.
Oh yeah, she definitely got like very old. So
she
could just have died of old age immediately. Yeah. I don't think so.
Okay. I think this will be a gotta catch 'em all situation where volume 2 will be him trying to get more guns.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think that we're gonna end up with oh, that's actually really interesting, because yeah, the only gun that he doesn't have now Drake doesn't have is the one that Missy has, and then the one that Becky has.
He had 5. I
So,
thought
yeah.
he had 4. So there should be one more he doesn't have.
There's the one Becky has and the one Missy has.
And there's only 6 guns.
He had 5 guns
Guys,
on his belt at one point.
Guys, I can't do math. Guys.
I was confused at one point because he had 5 guns stuck into his pants. And I realized that, one of those is just his gun.
How about you, Brian? What do you think?
I think that we're gonna get a Buffy the Vampire Slayer scenario.
Okay.
Where the only way to truly stop evil is going to be to open that gate and go into it.
Yeah.
And they're gonna have to destroy the guns in Mount Doom.
One does not. It's like Chekhov's Hellgate. Like one does not simply show a Hellgate and then not have it open at some point.
Yeah.
Is this series continuing to be ongoing, or is it stopped at this point? Is it finished?
It's a great question. I have no idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
Danny says the series is done. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you, Danny.
Thank you, Danny.
Hero we don't deserve.
Very cool. Well, thank you guys very much for joining me. I think that we're pretty well wrapped up here, unless somebody else has a closing thought for us.
Nope.
Very cool. Well, you can join us here again next week, where Mike, Paul, and Kara will be reading Final Crisis in order to put Mike through a crisis of his own. In the meantime, you can follow us on Twitter. You can follow Kait at Kait Elfear. You can follow me at BrianHead, and you can follow the show at IRCB Podcast on Twitter and Instagram.
This episode first aired on Patreon and is possible because of our wonderful Patreons. Join today for exclusive series like IRCB Movie Club, Saga of Saga, and more. Join now at patreon.com/IRCB podcast. If you haven't already, please rate and review our show. We would love 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps us spread the word about IRCB.
Join the IRCB Discord community to chat comics and more and listen to our episodes live as we record. Check out the link in the show notes. And it would help us a lot if you tell your friends or your local comic shop about the show.
Infinity Shred is the best band in the universe. They do the music for our show. Xander is a cool guy. He's our editor, and he is the rootinest, tootinest cowpoke I know. Thank you to Kait and Kait for joining me. Thank you to Mike and Xander for everything you do for the show. Thank you to our wonderful listeners. And until next time, comics are good, and so are you.